The blast from the explosion sends everyone diving for cover. Half a pound of C4, carefully placed by FBI demolition experts, detonates against the warehouse doors with enough force to level a small house. There's no earthly reason why the doors, rusty and old as they are, would be left standing after that. And yet, they are, because what the FBI is dealing with here might not be earthly. Special Agent in Charge Nolan Forrester screams for backup into his walkie-talkie as more agents from the Bureau ready a battering ram for the door. Others load magazines into standard-issue handguns and assault rifles. This was supposed to be a simple sting operation, one that should have taken this cult down in a single blow. And now, everything is going sideways, and lives are on the line. The agents with the ram slam against the doors with all of their might. Nothing. Everyone there can hear the chanting inside the warehouse, almost deafening. A song in absolute devotion to the second haptic assembly. And Forrester's undercover man is still inside. With a heavy heart, Special Agent Forrester authorized the armed agents to open fire into the door. Anything that might get it open, even if it means the risk of the bullets hitting the people inside. They've come too far to give up now. All this began on April 2nd, 1992, when a strange man was seen performing some kind of religious demonstration in a public park in Boston, Massachusetts. He wasn't the kind of guy you look twice at. A bearded Hispanic man of average height and build, dressed in an unremarkable t-shirt and blue jeans. Though while he wasn't all that strange at face value, the literature he was handing out to his crowd of onlookers certainly was. It advertised membership to a fringe religious group, the Second Haptic Assembly. Haptic, by the way, is an umbrella term for things relating to the sense of physical touch. The flyer claimed that through the group's teachings, any person could gain the ability to shape the forces of the physical universe, not unlike a god. The secret was a process they called thaumaturgy, an occult word for ritual magic. There's no law against believing in kooky New Age spirituality, but there is a law against public demonstrations without an official permit. The man was arrested and identified as Diego Marquez, and as he was being shoved into the back of a police cruiser, he started ranting about his beliefs. He spoke about how there were entities out there called the Prime Movers. There was something about an unknown location Marquez called the Wanderer's Library, and of course, repeated claims about gaining the power of a god. It didn't take the cops long to release Marquez. After all, on the average day, there are plenty more dangerous criminals to put in those jail cells than some delusional local street preacher. But his strange words caught the attention of FBI agents working under Nolan Forrester at the Anomalous Tactical Unit Northeastern Division. Opening up a new file, he and the other agents were given a directive by their superior, Assistant Director Sullivan. Find out everything you can about Diego Marquez and the Second Haptic Assembly. He may have seemed like just another harmless crazy at first, but the last thing the Bureau wanted was another Waco or Manson family situation on their hands. Forrester's unit was surprised to find that the Second Haptic Assembly wasn't just word vomit from Marquez. In fact, they'd left a surprising paper trail going back decades. First registered in Oregon in 1958, then again in California in 1966, in New York in 1981, and most recently in Massachusetts starting in 1989. There were no citations against the group, so it struck the FBI as strange that they kept moving around and re-registering. Nolan made a note in his memo book that night. What are they trying to hide? The Second Haptic Assembly seemed like a mix of all the standard New Age cult woo-woo. Meditation, group prayer, sing-alongs, and some beliefs straight out of science fiction. The solar system, according to them, was created by a group called the Prime Movers, many-handed entities that possessed immense supernatural power as a result of evolving their bodies with magic. Some of the ancients drew connections to an obscure cult several centuries old, the Many Hands Society in ancient Greece. Their belief system were eerily similar to the modern Second Haptic Assembly, even down to worshipping the Hecatoncheires, monstrous mythological giants also known as the 100-Handed Ones. Just like the Prime Movers in haptic doctrine, The Hecatoncheires were believed to have played a pivotal role in shaping the universe. If Marquez was running the Second Haptic Assembly, maybe that mysterious group of ancient Greeks was the first. But who was Marquez anyway? In Agent Forrester's experience, you couldn't have a cult without some visionary, charismatic leader, the kind you'd give all your worldly possessions to in order to help the cause, the one you might even die for or kill for, depending on what he asked. Forrester just knew that Marquez was the key to cracking this whole thing wide open. The problem was, Marquez was a ghost. Teams of seasoned FBI agents worked in shifts to dig up information on Diego Marquez and his background, but every corridor seemed to have a dead end. There was no address history, no education, no history of filing taxes or social security, not even a birth certificate. When it came to official records, the closest they had to any kind of dirt on Marquez was a small misdemeanor arrest report from the NYPD in 1987, after they'd booked Marquez. But despite this lack of government records, there was one vital clue on the trail. Marquez had written and self-published a religious text, Many Hands Hold Up the World, which outlined the cult's beliefs and his personal place in the grand cosmology. Specifically, Marquez claimed to have been contacted directly by the many-handed ones, the prime movers, and he'd been given a portion of their power as a result. Now it was his calling to help evolve his brothers and sisters in the cult so they could share in the incredible thaumaturgic power that was out there. In between this, there were extended tracks about how the religion was oppressed by more mainstream belief systems, by the police and the government. A cult leader with delusions of grandeur and a sense of resentment towards the government and non-believers? To Agent Forrester, that seemed like an incredibly dangerous combination. On the strength of this evidence, he received funding and extra personnel from Assistant Director Sullivan and search warrants from the local judge. All Forrester needed now was a man on the inside to deliver a smoking gun. Tails were put on known members, and a search through local property records in Boston found that the cult had purchased a large multi-story warehouse on the outskirts of the city, which they'd converted into an area for group worship. And after spending a few days tracking the comings and goings outside of the warehouse, Special Agent Forrester found the perfect trump card for getting inside. A local lowlife named Rudy Carmichael. Carmichael had priors and an active arrest warrant for pushing Schedule I substances. That could mean a long time in jail. When agents intercepted Rudy and arrested him, he was given a deal that was too good to turn down. If he was willing to become a confidential informant in a sting operation against the Second Haptic Assembly, they'd expunge his record. Rudy Carmichael could live the rest of his life as a free man. Naturally, Carmichael overlooked any reservations about betraying his new religion and signed up. On April 13, 1992, Rudy was sent to infiltrate a special meeting of the Second Haptic Assembly with a microphone and camera hidden in his lapel. The following is the footage of that infiltration. At first, things seemed relatively normal. Rudy and the other Second Haptic Assembly congregants were lingering around the main hall, making idle chatter, enjoying coffee, juices, and sandwiches on the refreshment table. And when the services began, Rudy approached a big circle of chairs positioned around a dais in the center of the room. And standing on that dais was Diego Marquez, ready to lead the group in meditation, prayer, and even a sing-along session. Rudy knew that outside the warehouse, a large number of FBI agents were assembled and hidden, ready to storm into the room at a moment's notice if they had any reason to. But for some reason, that didn't make him feel any safer. Maybe he knew just a little bit too much about what happened to David Koresh and his followers at Waco. With all the services complete, it was time for Diego to begin his sermon while Rudy watched him from the seated crowd. This sermon was darker than the rest. It took on an oddly apocalyptic tone, talking about how the police and Christianity were trying to destroy them. If they wanted to survive these pressures, they needed to use their power to fight back. In one part of his fire and brimstone speech, he said,
"The goal of the Assembly and the many-handed ones is to see our people evolve. They've been watching out for mankind in one way or another since we came down from the trees."
"Don't be confused. This is what I mean when I say we are here to grow.
We need to evolve, but how can we grow? With the boot of the policeman on our neck. How do we evolve with the draining oppression of populist Christianity forcing the government to hold us back?
And now, it was time for the evolution to begin. To Rudy's surprise, Diego started calling up volunteers to the stage where he could perform a demonstration. And of course, Rudy was one of the ones selected. He tried making excuses, but it didn't work. With the pressure of the crowd around him, he got up and walked over to Diego, who began speaking to him in strange, supernatural words that he couldn't even begin to understand. But the words didn't need to be understood to have the desired effect. Rudy felt his body getting heavy. He began slowly collapsing to the floor, his consciousness leaving him, as Agent Forrester and the other FBI agents just watched helplessly from the camera feed. Sudden flashes of strange colors seemed to interrupt the feed, and then bizarre shapes drifted across the screen. Forrester could have sworn they looked like tentacles. This brings us full circle, as the feed cut out, and Forrester authorized getting into that warehouse by any means necessary. With the help of high-powered assault rifle fire, the doors were busted open at last, and the fire team ran in. Agent Forrester, in defiance of common sense, leading the charge. The agents maintaining the perimeter outside heard gunshots from within, soon replaced by complete silence. No contact from the agents inside, no shouting or commands, nothing. A request for backup was immediately passed up the chain by the perimeter agents, first reaching Deputy Director Sullivan, and then FBI Director William S. Sessions himself. This, it seemed, was a case too thorny for the FBI to tackle alone. Instead, Director Sessions contacted agents of the SCP Foundation, an elite and secretive organization designed specifically to take on abnormal, supernatural, and downright anomalous cases just like this. They agreed to dispatch one of their mobile task forces, a small but specialized group of agents, to deal with the problem immediately. MTF Beta 777, codenamed Hecate's Spear after the ancient Greek goddess of witchcraft, was sent in on a helicopter. These task force members were all experts in understanding and counteracting thaumaturgy. The FBI agents around the perimeter were instructed that if anything exited the warehouse that they didn't recognize, they were to pepper it with bullets until it stopped moving, no matter what it was. As the Foundation team entered the warehouse, two members noticed that arcane sigils had been written around the door. That explained why it had been so hard to break before. The sorcerers in the group were able to disable the sigils, letting them proceed further into the warehouse, where terrible carnage awaited them. Multiple cult members and FBI agents were dead, strewn across the ground where a firefight had taken place. It seemed that Diego's claims about his cultists being able to fight back were more than just idle threats or cult dogma, but the devastation out in the main hall still didn't hold a candle to the horrors that were waiting for them below. The Hecate's Spear team filed down into a lower level of the warehouse, where 6 cells decorated like primitive surgery suites were kept behind lock and key. In 5 out of the 6 cells, there were dead bodies, the victims of what seemed to be some kind of thaumaturgical surgery. They had too many limbs. Their bodies were just wrong. And despite seeming to have been dead for a while, they showed no signs of decay. In the 6th cell, Rudy Carmichael was lying in a hospital gurney, unconscious but alive. They could help him later. Priority number 1 was finding and containing Marquez before he escaped. He was clearly a far more dangerous threat than the FBI had ever accounted for. And in what seemed to be the warehouse's inner sanctum, they found Diego Marquez. He was holding up an incredibly wounded Special Agent Forrester by the throat with inhuman strength. The task force members ordered Marquez to relinquish Forrester and surrender. He followed at least half that order, throwing Forrester to the ground like a rag doll and turning to the Foundation agents with rage in his glowing blue eyes. With a careful ritualistic hand movement, an iridescent portal opened up on the wall next to him, unleashing the tendrils of a horrifying entity, a prime mover, a many-handed one, reaching out on long, coiling tentacles with human-like hands on each tip. Knowing that they had to break the summoning link rather than trying to take on a god-level thaumaturgic being, the task force instead opened fire on Marquez. They lit him up with bullets and dropped him to his knees. Blood poured from the cult leader's mouth. It looked like he might even have been bested, until he raised his hands up above his head and in a tremendous flash of light disappeared, vanishing the portal and the prime mover with him. Diego Marquez is still out there, and who knows where he and the second haptic assembly might appear next. Now check out SCP-001, 12 Tales About a Factory, or SCP-001, Church of the Broken God Explained for more.